The knock came at midnight, a frantic, desperate sound that didn't belong in the quiet stillness of my old house. I wasn't asleep, of course. At my age, sleep is more of a visitor than a resident, and my nights are often spent with a good book and a warm cup of tea. But this sound, this panicked drumming on the old oak door, sent a chill through me. For over 40 years, my work had been to trace the quiet lines of history, to find the lost and forgotten people tucked away in dusty records. My life was about patience and order, and this was chaos itself. Through the peephole, I saw my daughter, Clara, her face pale and streaked with tears under the yellow glow of the porch light. Her lovely blonde hair was a mess, and she was trembling like a leaf in a storm. I threw the door open without a second thought. Clara. She collapsed into my arms, her sobs echoing in the silent hallway. "Mom," she gasped, her voice cracking. "David's gone. He sold everything. The paintings, the sculptures, all of it. The accounts are empty. He just vanished." A cold, heavy certainty settled in my heart. It wasn't the shock a mother should feel. It was a dreadful, weary sense of confirmation. I was heartbroken for my darling girl, of course, but I can't say I was surprised. I'd been waiting for a night like this for 7 years, ever since Clara brought home the charming, handsome art dealer with a story for everything and verifiable proof of nothing. It was the beginning of a story that's almost too incredible to believe. Make sure you're following, because you won't want to miss what happened next. "Come inside, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady as I led her to the worn armchair by the fireplace. "Tell me everything, from the very beginning." Clara's story came out in a torrent of grief and confusion. She'd come home from a short trip visiting her cousin to find the walls of their beautiful home bare. The art that David had spent years curating, the collection that was their life's investment, was gone. She logged into their bank accounts to find nothing but a few dollars left. All that remained was a short, cruel note on the kitchen counter, saying he'd gone to chase an opportunity he couldn't refuse, and that she shouldn't try to find him. His gallery was closed, his phone disconnected. "I gave him everything, Mom," she whispered, her voice raw. "My inheritance from Dad, our savings. I believed in his talent, in his vision. It was all a lie." I held her, stroking her hair as she cried, my mind already working, clicking through facts and details like the tumblers of a lock. When her sobs finally quieted into ragged breaths, I stood up. "Stay right here, darling." In my study, the room where I'd spent decades piecing together the puzzles of other people's lives, was a heavy, fireproof filing cabinet. In the back of the bottom drawer, behind files of old census records and shipping manifests, was a plain gray folder with a single word on the tab: Nightingale. I hadn't planned on ever opening it. I had prayed I wouldn't have to. Inside was 7 years of quiet, painstaking work. 7 years of tracing the life of the man who called himself David Monroe. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had committed to memory long ago. "Arthur, it's Helen Bishop. I need to call in that favor. It's time. He's made his move. Nightingale is in the wind." I hung up and returned to the living room, the gray folder in my hand. Clara looked up, her eyes red and swollen, confusion mixing with the despair on her face. "Mom? Who was that? What's Nightingale?" I sat on the ottoman in front of her, taking her cold hands in mine. "Clara, honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What David has done is more than just leaving you. It's a crime. A very big, very complicated crime. And I've been getting ready for it since the day he first told me his grandfather was a French diplomat." Her eyes widened in disbelief. You knew this would happen?" "I suspected," I corrected gently. "My work has taught me that stories have to add up. The details have to connect. David's stories never did. The names, the dates, the places, they were like beautiful brushstrokes on a canvas with no substance behind it. I couldn't prove anything, but I had enough doubt to start looking. "Looking into what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I opened the file. "The kind of looking that will help us find him, freeze his assets, and prove who he really is." The first page was a detailed genealogical chart. "The man you married, David Monroe, doesn't exist. His real name, as best as I can tell, is Thomas Crowley, and you're not his first wife." Clara stared at the paper as if it were a snake. She pulled her hands back. "You've been investigating my husband? For years? Why wouldn't you tell me?" It was the reaction I expected, the hurt of a double betrayal, one from her husband and one, she felt, from me. "Sweetheart, look at me," I said, my voice firm but full of the love I had for her. "If I had come to you 5 years ago, or even 1 year ago, and told you your charming, successful husband was a phantom, a lie, would you have believed me, or would you have believed him?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. "I was protecting you, my love, in the only way I knew how. I was hoping with all my heart that my research would prove me wrong, that I was just being a suspicious old woman. But I was right. And now we have to move fast. Men like Thomas don't just disappear, they reinvent themselves, and we have a very small window to catch him before he does." She stared at the file, then at me, and I saw the fight return to her eyes, the same spark her father had. He'd been a history professor, a man who believed in truth above all else. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice stronger now. "Everything," I said, turning the page to show her property records under different names. Photographs of auction catalogs featuring art with questionable histories. Notes from my conversations with him where his stories had changed. He claimed his family came from old money in Boston, but I traced the Crowley line back to dirt farmers in Oklahoma. He told you a painting was a lost Degas, but I found shipping records showing it was imported from a known forger in Belgium 2 years ago. "Oh my God," she breathed, sinking back into the chair. "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid," I said fiercely. "You're trusting, and he exploited that. Now I need you to tell me everything. Every gallery he worked with, every collector he mentioned, every private sale, every trip he ever took alone. We have a long night ahead of us, and in the morning, we're going to see Arthur. He's not just any lawyer. He's the best art fraud attorney in the country. And we are going to take this ghost apart, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the truth." As dawn streamed through the windows, I felt a familiar sense of purpose. My work had always been about finding the truth of the past. Now, it was about using that truth to save my daughter's future. Thomas Crowley had stolen from the daughter of a woman who knew better than anyone that the past never truly disappears. And I was about to make sure his past caught up to him with a vengeance. The next morning, Clara and I walked into the impressive offices of Arthur Vance. The walls were lined with beautiful, authenticated art, a stark contrast to the fraudulent world we were there to dismantle. Clara was exhausted, her face pale, but a new resolve had settled in her eyes. The shock was turning into a cold, hard anger. She'd spent the night digging through her own records, pulling up emails, receipts, and photographs, her mind now refocused from grief to the hunt. She'd discovered the scale of the theft was even worse than she'd imagined. Not only had he sold their entire collection, worth nearly $500,000, but he had also apparently taken out a massive loan against her name, using her inheritance as collateral. The total came to almost $700,000. "How could he get a loan in my name? I never signed anything," she'd asked, staring at the bank's website in horror. "Digital forgery," I'd murmured, my heart aching for her. "Or he tricked you into signing something you thought was for something else. These men are masters of deception." Now, in Arthur's quiet, elegant conference room, surrounded by a mountain of paper, Clara looked like a soldier preparing for battle. Arthur Vance entered, a man in his late 60s with a kind face and eyes that missed nothing. He had been a friend and professional contact for 20 years, a brilliant lawyer who had started his career tracking down art stolen during World War II. He was one of the few people who understood my particular talents. "Helen," he said with a warm, sad smile, "I'm so sorry it's come to this." He then turned to my daughter. "Clara, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Thank you for seeing us, Arthur," Clara said, her voice steady. "My mother says you're the best." "Your mother is a force of nature," Arthur replied, settling into his chair and looking at the nightingale file I'd placed on the table. "Let's see what this bird has been up to." For the next hour, Clara laid out the story, her voice gaining strength as she detailed the deception. I filled in the gaps with my own research, explaining the false identities, the fabricated family histories, the questionable provenances of the art he'd sold. Arthur listened intently, making precise notes on a yellow legal pad. "So we have Thomas Crowley, also known as David Monroe," he summarized. "Married to you for 7 years. An art dealer of considerable charm, but no verifiable history. As of 2 days ago, he has liquidated all known assets, including pieces sold to reputable collectors, and disappeared, leaving behind a forged loan document and a mountain of debt." "He also had a mistress," Clara added, her voice tight. "His gallery assistant, a woman named Isabella. She's disappeared too." I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. The personal betrayal was a wound that ran deeper than any financial loss. "Let's focus on the financial trail for now," I said gently. "The law is better at healing bank accounts than broken hearts." Arthur nodded, turning a page on his pad. "Based on Helen's file and what you've provided, Clara, we're looking at wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery, and grand larceny on a massive scale. The good news is, Thomas Crowley made a mistake. He got comfortable. Selling high-profile art, even with fake papers, creates a trail. And running with an assistant is sloppy. Can we find him? Can we get any of it back?" Clara asked, the question hanging in the air. "We can, and we will," Arthur said with a confidence that seemed to fill the room. "Helen's foresight has given us a monumental head start. While you were driving here, I was already filing emergency petitions. As of an hour ago, we have court orders to freeze any account we can find under the names Thomas Crowley or David Monroe. We've also put out alerts to every major auction house and art gallery in the country, as well as Interpol's stolen art division." Clara stared at him, then at me. "All of that happened already?" "This is what I was preparing for, sweetheart," I said softly. "Arthur and I established a protocol for this 5 years ago, after David, Thomas, first convinced you to let him invest your inheritance." 5 years? The hurt was back in her voice. "You thought my husband was going to rob me for 5 years and you never said a word?" "I was preparing for a storm I hoped would never come," I said, meeting her gaze. "If I had told you my suspicions, it would have driven a wedge between us, and he would have won. He would have isolated you from me. This way, I stayed close. I kept watch. And now, we are ready to fight back together." Arthur cleared his throat, sensing the delicate moment. "Helen's preparations are our greatest weapon. We have a detailed file that law enforcement would take months to build. I've already forwarded a summary to a contact of mine at the FBI's art crime team. Given the scale and interstate nature of this, they're going to be very interested." "But he could be anywhere by now," Clara worried. "He loves sailing," I said suddenly, an old memory clicking into place. "He always talked about buying a yacht and sailing to the Caribbean. He has a pilot's license, but he always said the sea felt like true freedom." "Interesting," Arthur mused. "Private marina sales are much harder to track than flights." Just then, his assistant buzzed in. "Mr. Vance, Agent Rossi from the FBI is online too. She says it's urgent." Arthur took the call on speaker. "This is Arthur Vance." "Mr. Vance, Agent Rossi. We received your file on Thomas Crowley. It's landed on my desk with a great deal of interest. Crowley is already on our watch list. He's suspected in at least 2 other major art fraud cases, one in Miami and one in Santa Fe. We just lost his trail 6 months ago. Your file is the missing link." "I'm glad we could help, Agent," Arthur said. "Then you'll be interested to know that a man matching his description, using the name Robert Sterling, just purchased a 45-foot sailboat in Charleston, South Carolina 2 days ago. Paid in cash. He filed a float plan for the Bahamas, departing tomorrow morning." "That's our window," I whispered, a surge of adrenaline in my veins. "Clara, does the name Robert Sterling mean anything to you?" She shook her head, bewildered. "It was the name of his supposed grandfather," I said, remembering a detail from one of his many stories. "The French diplomat. He was arrogant. He was leaving clues." "We need to move now." Agent Rossi's voice crackled over the phone. "We can have a team at the marina in Charleston within the hour. Mr. Vance, I need everything you have. And Ms. Bishop. Your file on Nightingale might just be what brings down one of the most prolific art con men on the East Coast." As Arthur began relaying information, Clara turned to me, her eyes a mix of awe and lingering hurt. "How did you know? How did you see all of this when I saw nothing?" "You saw the man you loved," I said simply. "I saw a story with too many missing pages. My whole life has been about finding those missing pages. The pieces were falling into place faster than I could have imagined." Thomas Crowley thought he had orchestrated the perfect disappearance, but he had made one fatal error. He had married the daughter of a woman whose entire life was dedicated to the principle that no one, no matter how clever, can ever truly erase their own history, and his was about to be laid bare for the world to see. Sleep was a luxury none of us could afford that night. While Agent Rossi mobilized her team in Charleston, Clara and I stayed at Arthur's office, working with a forensic accountant to trace the labyrinthine paths the money had taken. It was worse than we thought. Thomas had been siphoning funds for years, using a series of shell corporations and offshore accounts. The final sale of their art collection was just the last bold move in a long and calculated campaign of theft. At 4:00 a.m., I made coffee in the office kitchenette, my mind buzzing. Clara came in a few minutes later, looking exhausted but focused. "He used me," she said, her voice flat. "He hosted those gallery openings and charity dinners at our house not just to sell art, but to scout his next victims, our friends, our neighbors." "Men like Thomas see people as tools, my dear," I said, handing her a mug. "They don't form relationships, they form strategies." "You know," she said with a small, sad smile, "he never liked you. He always said you were too suspicious, too nosy. He tried to convince me to visit you less often." "That's a classic tactic of abusers and con men," I explained. "Isolate the target from their support system. It makes them easier to control. He didn't count on you having a mother who was a professional snoop." The first light of dawn was breaking over the city when Agent Rossi called. "We're in position," she said, her voice a low, professional hum. "The Odyssey is docked at the end of the pier. That's the name he registered the boat under. We have surveillance on it. A man and a woman came aboard about an hour ago with supplies. They haven't come back out." "Isabella," Clara mouthed silently. "We wait until they're ready to cast off," Agent Rossi continued. "We want to be sure he's on board and intending to flee. The warrant covers him, the boat, and his associate." For the next 2 hours, we waited. It was an agonizing silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the office. Then, at 7:15 a.m., Arthur's phone buzzed. It was Agent Rossi. "They're on deck. He's untying the lines. We're moving in." We couldn't see what was happening, but her words painted a vivid picture. "FBI, stay where you are. Hands in the air." There was a pause, and I could imagine the scene. The calm morning water, the shocked expression on Thomas's face, the swift, efficient movement of federal agents. "We have them in custody," Rossi finally said, and a collective breath was released in the room. "Both of them. No resistance. He looks completely stunned. I don't think he ever imagined he could be caught this quickly." "I want to see him," Clara said suddenly, her voice firm. "Agent Rossi, is there any way I can speak to him on a video call?" There was a moment of hesitation on the other end of the line. "It's an unusual request, but given your role in his capture..." "Stand by." A few minutes later, a video feed flickered to life on the conference room monitor. We saw Thomas Crowley, no longer the suave art dealer, but a man in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He was sitting in a small room, agents standing behind him. Then he saw Clara on the screen. His expression shifted instantly, the smooth, persuasive charm sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. "Clara, thank God," he began, his voice dripping with false concern. "This is a terrible misunderstanding. These people have it all wrong. I was moving our assets to protect them from a market crash. It was a surprise for you." "Save it, Thomas," Clara cut him off, her voice as cold and clear as ice. "Or should I say, Mr. Crowley? The forged loan? The shell companies? The years of lies? Was that all to protect me?" His eyes flickered to me, standing just behind my daughter. I gave him a small, tight smile. The charming mask slipped, replaced by pure venom. "You," he hissed. "The old librarian. I knew you were trouble from the start." Genealogist, I corrected him calmly. And yes, you should have. Clara leaned into the camera, her face a portrait of righteous fury. Where's Isabella? Is she the one you left me for? Thomas let out a short, bitter laugh. Isabella, she was just an employee. She knew nothing about this. I paid her a generous severance and told her the gallery was closing. She's probably halfway back to Ohio by now. This was never about another woman, Clara. It was about getting what I was owed. The world owes me a certain lifestyle, and I simply collected. The cruelty of it hit Clara, and I saw her flinch. It wasn't another love that had replaced her. It was nothing. She had been a stepping stone, an obstacle to be discarded. The woman on the boat with him isn't Isabella, Agent Rossi's voice cut in. We've identified her. Her name is Eleanor Vance, and according to our records, she married a man named David Monroe 3 years ago in Miami. The room fell silent. Arthur looked stunned. Vance? Any relation? She's my niece, he said, his face pale. My estranged brother's daughter. I had no idea. The deception was deeper and more twisted than any of us could have imagined. Thomas Crowley hadn't just run off with a mistress. He was a bigamist. He had been living a double life, with 2 wives, in 2 different cities. He hadn't been fleeing with an accomplice. He had simply been moving from one victim to the next. As the video call ended, Clara sank into her chair, speechless. The betrayal had a new, monstrous shape. She hadn't just been married to a thief, she had been part of a collection. I put my hand on her shoulder. This is a good thing, I said softly. She looked at me, her eyes full of pain. How is this good? Because a man who builds a web this tangled always gets caught in it. He now has multiple victims, multiple jurisdictions, and a mountain of evidence against him. He thought he was a master puppeteer, but he just got all his strings tangled. And we, I squeezed her shoulder, are going to pull every last one. The investigation into Thomas Crowley's life revealed a breathtaking scope of deception. He was a predator of the highest order, a man who had perfected the art of becoming exactly what his victims wanted. Agent Rossi and her team discovered that he had a 3rd wife, a woman named Sophia, a recent widow in Santa Fe whom he had married under yet another name. He had been juggling 3 separate lives, 3 wives, and at least a dozen major investors he was systematically defrauding. His arrest in Charleston hadn't been an escape, it was merely a rotation. He was leaving Clara's life and moving on to Eleanor's, planning to drain her resources before presumably moving on to Sophia's. The FBI, armed with my Nightingale file and the new evidence, officially took over the case. They were building a massive RICO case against him, treating his activities as a criminal enterprise. Agent Rossi asked for Clara's full cooperation. It will mean your life becomes an open book, she warned. Your finances, your marriage, your trust, it will all be dissected in court documents. But your testimony, as the woman who was with him the longest, is crucial to putting him away for good. Clara didn't hesitate. I'll do whatever it takes, for Eleanor, for Sophia, and for anyone else he's hurt. The first step, Agent Rossi suggested, was for the 3 women to speak. We find that in cases like this, comparing notes can be incredibly helpful. It helps victims understand the methodology of the deception and often uncovers details that wouldn't seem important alone. And so, a week later, we were back in Arthur's conference room for a secure video conference. On the screen were 2 other women. Eleanor, the niece of Arthur, was a fiery redhead with a look of stunned anger. Sophia, from Santa Fe, was older, with a gentle, sad face that spoke of deep wounds. For a moment, they just looked at each other, 3 strangers united by the most intimate betrayal. Clara broke the silence. I'm Clara, she said, her voice quiet, and I guess we were all married to the same monster. Eleanor let out a humorless laugh. Monster is a good word. I'm Eleanor. Arthur is my uncle, though we haven't spoken in years. Thomas, or David, told me he was dead. He told me he was an orphan, Sophia added softly, that he had no family at all. It made me feel protective of him. For the next 2 hours, they talked. The stories were chillingly similar. He had met each of them after they had suffered a loss, Clara after her father's death, Eleanor after a bitter divorce, Sophia after her husband passed away. He had presented himself as the perfect man, charming, attentive, and financially savvy. He had slowly, methodically, taken control of their finances, always under the guise of protecting them. He had isolated each of them from friends and family who expressed doubts. My best friend never trusted him, Eleanor recalled. He called her jealous and possessive, and I believed him. I actually stopped talking to her. My son warned me, Sophia said, tears welling in her eyes. He said something wasn't right about Charles. That was his name in Santa Fe. And Thomas created so much friction between us that my son stopped visiting. Clara nodded, a painful recognition on her face. He did the same with me and my mother. As they spoke, something incredible began to happen. The shame that had haunted each of them, the feeling that they alone had been foolish, began to dissolve. In its place grew a shared, powerful anger. They discovered he used the same pet names, told the same fabricated stories about his childhood, and even bought them similar pieces of jewelry. He was a con man working from a script. The sailboat, Clara said suddenly. The Odyssey. Did he ever talk to you about sailing? All the time, Eleanor said. It was our dream, to sell everything and just sail away. He told me the same thing, Sophia whispered. They were his exit strategy. Each woman was a harbor, and he was the pirate, plundering one port before sailing on to the next. The conference call solidified their resolve. They formed an unlikely team, working together to provide Agent Rossi with every email, every receipt, every memory they had. Their combined evidence was overwhelming. It painted a picture of a predator who was as meticulous as he was heartless. After the call, Clara was quiet for a long time as we drove home. I always thought I was the love of his life, she said finally, looking out the window. But I wasn't even the only wife of his year. My dear, you loved the man he pretended to be, I told her. That man never existed. Your love was real. His was a performance. I know, she said, but it still hurts. Do you think any of it was real? Any moment? It was the question every victim asks. I chose my words carefully. I think a man like Thomas is a black hole. He reflects the light you shine on him, but inside, there's only emptiness. The warmth you felt was your own. Over the next few months, the case moved forward. With the combined evidence from all three women, the FBI was able to track down hidden storage units and secret bank accounts. They recovered nearly $2 million in cash and stolen art. Thomas, facing an ironclad case and the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison, finally agreed to cooperate. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he would give up the locations of all his hidden assets. The prosecutor's office asked for the victims' input. Clara, Eleanor, and Sophia had another conference call. I don't want revenge, Clara said. I want restitution. I want every penny he stole returned to the people he hurt, especially the other investors who lost their retirement savings. Eleanor and Sophia agreed. Their priority wasn't to see him suffer the maximum penalty. It was to see the damage he'd caused repaired. Their grace in the face of such betrayal was astounding. 6 months after his arrest, Thomas Crowley was sentenced. He was given 20 years in federal prison. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly read the victim impact statements, was scathing in her assessment. You didn't just steal money, Mr. Crowley, she said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. You stole years from these women's lives. You stole their trust, their security, and their faith in others. No sentence can truly account for that kind of theft. I was in the courtroom gallery that day, sitting with Clara. Eleanor and Sophia were there too. When the sentence was read, the three women didn't celebrate. They simply held hands, a silent testament to the strange, powerful bond they had forged. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Clara, who had once been a shattered victim, now stood tall and spoke with a calm, clear voice. This man's story is over, she said, with Eleanor and Sophia by her side. But ours is just beginning. We want to make sure no one else has to go through what we did. And in that moment, I knew she had found her way out of the darkness. The con man had taken her money and her past, but in doing so, He had unwittingly given her a future and a purpose far greater than any he could have imagined. What he had meant for evil, she was determined to turn into good. A year after the sentencing, the world was a different place. Clara, Eleanor, and Sophia had done something remarkable. They had started a non-profit organization called the Provenance Project. Its mission was twofold: to educate the public about the warning signs of relationship and financial fraud, and to provide resources and support for victims. What started as a small website and a support hotline quickly grew into a nationally recognized foundation. Clara, with her background in marketing, became its public face. She gave talks, appeared on news programs, and even wrote a book about her experience. She was no longer a victim. She was a powerful advocate, her voice filled with an authority that had been forged in the fires of betrayal. I watched my daughter blossom with a pride so fierce it sometimes felt like it would burst my heart. The shy, trusting girl was gone, replaced by a confident, savvy woman who was using her own pain to shield others. The foundation's work was making a real difference. We received letters and emails every week from people who had recognized the red flags in their own lives because of something Clara had said in an interview or a checklist they'd found on the foundation's website. Families were being saved, life savings were being protected. One evening, I was at Clara's house for dinner. She had sold the house she shared with Thomas and bought a smaller, cozier place that was all her own. The walls were filled with art from young, local artists, each piece bought because she loved it, not because of its investment value. Maria and Eleanor were there too, having flown in for a board meeting. Their friendship was one of the most beautiful and unexpected outcomes of the whole ordeal. "We got a call on the hotline today," Eleanor said as we sat in the living room. A woman in Texas. Her new husband, a financial guru, was pressuring her to liquidate her late husband's pension and let him invest it for her. She said his stories didn't add up, and it reminded her of what she'd read about Thomas. "We put her in touch with a forensic accountant in her area," Clara added. "It turns out the guru has a criminal record for fraud in 2 other states. She got out before she lost a dime." "That's another one," I said, raising my glass of iced tea. "Another life you've saved." "It's not just us, Mom," Clara said, smiling at me. "The Helen Bishop Guide to Vetting a New Suitor is the most popular download on our site." I had helped her create a simple guide based on my genealogical research techniques: how to check public records, how to spot inconsistencies in a personal history, how to listen to your gut when a story feels too good to be true. I never imagined my quiet, dusty old profession could become a tool for modern-day justice. A few months later, I officially retired. The library threw a lovely party for me, and I was content to imagine a future filled with gardening and grandchildren, should Clara ever decide to trust again. But fate, it seems, had other plans. I received a call from Arthur Vance. "Helen," he said, "the governor's office is putting together a new task force on elder fraud and financial exploitation. They need a civilian advisor, someone with a non-law enforcement perspective who understands how these predators operate on a human level. I submitted your name. They want to meet with you." I was stunned. "Me? Arthur, I'm a retired genealogist." "You're the woman who caught Thomas Crowley," he replied, "and you have a unique way of looking at things. You see the patterns people miss. Just think about it." I thought about it. I thought about all the victims we couldn't help, the ones who called the hotline too late. I thought about how these predators thrived in the shadows, exploiting loopholes and the natural trust of good people. Perhaps I could do more than just help Clara's foundation. Perhaps I could help change the system itself. I took the position. My new office was in the state capitol, a world away from my quiet library. I was working with lawmakers, prosecutors, and police chiefs to craft new legislation, to design better training programs, and to raise public awareness. It was challenging, fascinating work. Together, my daughter and I had become an unlikely team. She was working from the outside, helping victims one by one, while I was working from the inside, trying to fortify the walls. 2 years after that terrible midnight knock, Clara hosted the first annual gala for the Provenance Project. The ballroom was filled with survivors, donors, and law enforcement officials who had come to support the cause. I stood at the back of the room, watching my daughter at the podium. She was radiant, a vision in a deep blue gown, speaking with passion and grace. A predator once told me that this was all about getting what the world owed him, she said to the silent, captivated audience. Well, we are here tonight to say that we, the survivors, are collecting a debt of our own. We are reclaiming our stories, our security, and our power, and we are building a world where trust is not a vulnerability, but a cherished strength that we all have a duty to protect. The applause was thunderous. Later that evening, she found me by the terrace. "What do you think, Mom?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "I think," I said, pulling her into a hug, "that you are the most incredible work of art I have ever seen." We stood there for a moment, looking out at the city lights. The past was never truly gone. The scars were real, but what had grown from that pain was stronger and more beautiful than anything we had lost. "He sent me a letter from prison last month," Clara said quietly. "I didn't open it. I just wrote, 'Return to sender,' address unknown on the envelope, and mailed it back." "A fitting end to a man who never really existed," I said. "He's a ghost," she agreed. "And we are real." Life is a strange and winding road. Sometimes the path leads into a dark and terrifying forest. But if you are lucky, if you have love and a little bit of fight in you, you can find your way out again. And sometimes you emerge from the darkness stronger, with a light of your own to help guide others home. And that, my dear, is the story of how my daughter's greatest heartbreak became her greatest purpose. I tell a new story here every single day, so if you want to hear another one tomorrow, make sure you follow and click that little bell so you don't miss it. And if you'd like to hear another surprising tale right now, just click on one of the videos you see on the screen.